Me and my twin brother were born in Seoul, 1982. At 1.5 years old, we were given up for adoption. And so there's like a big kind of crazy story around all of that. And so we actually grew up in Iowa. When I say the state Iowa, think about, the first picture that pops in your mind. And then our parents, that's what the situation looked like. So I have an older sister, natural born to my parents, older brother, natural born to my parents, and it's me and my twin brother, and then a younger sister who was also adopted, but adopted domestically. The city we grew up in wasn't like super rural. It was probably like 150,000 people. And it was very interesting because there was a lot of industry in that community. So there was like the John Deere Tractor Works, which my dad worked at. My mom was a special education teacher. There's like cabinets and beef packing. And so there's lots of different people from all over the country kind of get there for work. And so I grew up kind of diverse, but there was definitely not very many Asians except for me, my twin brother, and the girl whose dad owned the Chinese restaurant in town. Growing up, I was very, very like angry. And so, as you mature and everything, you realize that the anger is from hurt. I look at my friends who have kids who are 1.5 and then picturing the separation. I feel like that was pretty traumatic for me. My brother seemed to handle it pretty well, but I was always just either depressed as early as I can remember or just angry. Because of that, I would get myself into a lot of trouble hanging out with the wrong crowd and everything like that. Like I found myself in a situation where my parents couldn't control me anymore, so they put me into foster care. And so, not because they were bad parents, it's because I was just like kind of uncontrollable, unfortunately. And when I was in foster care, the foster mom was half Korean, and so her mom was Korean. So I got to kind of understand what that looked like, but that just made things. It's probably not a good move by the Department of Human Services or whatever, because it mixed me up a lot more. And so, yeah, it was just a very, very like, growing up in general is not easy. And then growing up with a situation where like no one around you looks like you, but then also kind of put me in a situation where like I have some kind of connection, but then like looking back, it was kind of like an unhealthy situation where they were like really treating me better than a lot of the other foster kids in the home. And I helped carry some guilt with that, and it was just a mess. And the whole situation was I was separated from my adoptive parents and everything like that, and I was almost like turning my back on them, being really hurtful to them, trying to like cleave to this other group of people that weren't the healthiest group of people. In all honesty, I think it's a combination of just sadness, anger, confusion, and then I was a very athletic kid, and so there was definitely a lot of testosterone that fueled all of it, and it's just a big, a big, um, just a big mess, yeah. But I honestly believe like if I would have just had some people that could really understand me and help walk me through life, that things might have been different. Like, and I don't like my past is my past. I can't do anything about it. Like my whole thing is just move forward, like move forward, move forward, move forward. Not in a way where you're forgetting your past or disregarding it or not learning from it. But you have to move forward, otherwise, you start sinking. After I got out of the military, I ended up in Southern California in an area which was primarily Caucasian and Hispanic. And then literally 20 minutes up the road was Irvine, which is mostly Korean, Chinese, UCI. But I never was able to make that bridge. And so there's definitely times when I ended up going on staff with the ministry organization, reaching out to high school and middle school age kids, and then, developing volunteers and staff members and fundraising, all that good stuff, and then taking kids to camp. And so, like, I really felt like I could figure out some of my childhood stuff by being there for kids, kind of going through similar things, at least a lot of pain and abandonment and high risk type situations. But there were definitely some times during that when I'm in this beach town, and then you know the mecca of Orange County Korean Americans is literally 20 minutes up the road, but I still feel so far away from being able to, utilize that because all my time and energy is being poured into this community. I had like a sabbatical in 2016, and then like I knew I was going to do two things. I was going to fly to Chicago and visit my friend because he's getting married, one of my high school friends, and I knew that I was probably going to end up in Korea, and like I had like a spiritual pull in that direction. I was ready for it, but I was still just uncomfortable. I just knew it was going to be uncomfortable. But I ended up during my sabbatical joining a I hate using the word adoptee. I got involved with a tour of adults who were in similar situations as I was, and came out to Korea for 10 days, and then really got the whole experience, and then spent another couple of weeks out here, just kind of you know exploring. Stayed at a guest house with a whole bunch of other people who stayed longer and everything like that, and it was a good time, and I really enjoyed it. And I met a friend from a church who like kind of whispered into my ear that like, hey, I think you could, do well out here. Think about moving out here. I'm like, haha, yeah. Came back to the States and then like I really felt like a spiritual pull to come out and live out here, which was um very, very irrational from my perspective because like I spent the last 10 years building into a community. Like I knew the sheriffs, I knew teachers, I knew principals, um, communities of people. I literally sold all my stuff, um, 2 suitcases, stayed at my grandparents for the last night, and then sold my car at Carfax and jumped on a plane and came out and um, stayed at Negoshiwan near Yonsei University, and then went to language academy out there. My plan, like literally, my plan was come here, learn as much Korean as possible within 3 to 6 months, and then from there, kind of figure out what was going to happen next. Which is totally not my character because like I'm a planner. I just felt like this is I had no idea what was going on. I just knew that I needed to be here. But what happened is my friend from church, his son plays baseball and is a very good catcher. And got to a point where he would ask me, "Can you take my son to the gym?" Because he knew I worked in the fitness industry for a few years before coming on staff with the outreach organization that I was working for. And he said, "If I feed you and study Korean with you a little bit, will you take my son and his friend to the YMCA and work out together?" I'm like, "Sure." And they saw results pretty quickly. And so then a couple of their friends' parents asked me to take their kids to the gym. My friend, he said, like, would you ever want to open up a gym? I'm like, sure. And so I was thinking, like, maybe this is going to be something um, like 6 months down the line we were going to do. But then literally we're signing a contract 2 weeks later. I was transferring money from the States for deposit. We are doing renovations and just things moved very quickly. And I had like literally 15, 20 Korean students with their families that I had this network with. And it was really cool, really fun. Being able to try to open up a new organization in a very, very different culture than what I'm used to is probably the challenge of my life. And like I said, I kind of like to do difficult things. And there's a language barrier as well. My job is to recruit bilingual volunteers, and we're bringing our first staff person on next month, bilingual staff person, and then probably start at the university level and really give university students the vision of what it could look like to help relieve some of the pressure that they've experienced as students to high school and middle schoolers, to be that mentoring role, to pour into the next generation. Not just from a Christian context, from a humanistic context, but also there's definitely faith elements in there. And that's something where if a young person decides that they don't want to have any part of, like our commitment is to still, kind of the thing that I like to say is like you belong before you believe. And even if you don't want to believe, or even if you don't believe, you're always going to belong. And just being able to have that no strings attached, like, hey, we know how hard it is to grow up in Korea. Like, let's just let me be here for you. Let me be a resource to you. Having a lot of Korean American friends has really helped the process along a lot. And so meeting a lot of guys like me who grew up with the Korean language, grew up with Korean parents, but still kind of feel the same way that I do. Like, oh, like I don't understand this, I don't understand that. This really gets under my skin. But just being able to talk about these things and realize that even though like I didn't have like the typical Korean American experience, like it is very, very I can stand here and say like I identify myself as a Korean American without feeling like I'm being an imposter about it. And I think that's a huge step for me. My name is Corey Nissen, and this is my Korean American story.